I'm just gonna start off. I'm in the terminal and I'll make a directory. I'll call it using dash ESLint. I already have it, so it's gonna error out. That command is the same for either Windows, Linux, Mac OS. And then you're gonna cd to the directory to change directory to that. Okay, once inside there, now we're gonna create an npm project. So we're gonna use npm, the node package manager. So npm, let me increase the font, space init. This command creates a file called package.json, so we don't have to create it manually. And it asks a few questions. I usually just press enter. I don't really care, but you can always change later. I say yes. Okay. Now you can open your text editor with this root folder. For example, Visual Studio Code, if you have the code command, space dot meaning current directory. I already have it open, so if I press enter, it will open again. So here it is, Visual Studio Code. I can see there's now a package.json file with all the properties with the values being the answers that were filled, and you can change them here if you want. Okay, now let's install ESLint. Going back to the terminal, you're gonna say npm space install space ESLint. Now, people usually like to add these instead of the dependencies property of package.json. They add to the dev dependencies because they like to separate packages that are only used for development versus the ones that are actually needed in production. So if you want to do that, you can add the option here between the install and the name of the package, dash dash save dash dev. Okay, now let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And you can see we have now dev dependencies instead of dependencies. ESLint is listed here with version 8.57.0. Now let's create a file here. Let's create an index.js. And I just start writing stuff. Maybe I'll write a function, hello, and I'll add some space here. You gotta be intentional and make some bad code style. Just put a function with console log and then maybe I'll add a really big indentation, return, and I'll use maybe single quotes here. And then I'll concatenate whatever, semicolon. And then outside, maybe you can be creative, just trying to have some sample code here so we can apply ESLint to and find out what the default rules are. Let's see, what else can we do? Let's make a variable, maybe var instead of let or const, var counter -1. I'm gonna add like a without space, like the equal sign right next to the R, and no semicolon here. Okay, and then I'm gonna add a lot of lines. Now let's just talk a little bit about ESLint. Just give an overview. ESLint is basically, so when we write programs, every person kind of have a distinctive style, especially if you work in a large company. You gotta have people coming and going, people coming and going. Somebody's gonna have to look at the code, write their own solution, put it there, combine with other people's, build on top of what another person has written, and so on. And every person's kind of slightly different, especially if the language allows for a lot of customization or different ways of doing the same thing. Like Ruby language, you have if statement, unless, which is if not, that kind of stuff. So people might write different ways, the same outcome. So some people take issue with that, with the distinctive style. They want to make a code base more consistent. Instead of having people argue against each other, they establish what are called linter rules. So that it will go through the code base and it will demand that you follow certain rules of style. So it's purely style. It's not so much as whether your solution is good or not. It's more about the readability, how you want your code to be written in a certain way, what the team thinks should be the standard way of writing just for that specific team and that code base. So ESLint has many rules that you can apply. So it will look at your code and determine if you're following the standard that was set by your team or not. So you can write your own rules and change them, tweak them around to fit your heart's content. Okay, but we're going to start off with some basic standard rules that ESLint already provides us when we generate the ESLint RC file. Okay, so let's go to the terminal. And here I'm going to say npx, and let me glance here at the docs because they keep changing the command to create the rule. Getting started, you can always go to the docs, getting started, there you go. So I have to say npm init at eslint/config. So if you use this command, it will generate the ESLint RC file according to several options that you can choose. So let's try it. Okay, so you can move the arrow with the arrow key to choose what you want to do. So if you're really loose, you just want to check syntax, or you want to find problems. And if you're really strict, you want to enforce code style. So I'm going to pick the middle ground to check syntax and find problems. Now, what type of modules does your project use? So this will depend on how usually the client side people like to use JavaScript modules that transpile to CommonJS, for example. Node.js is mostly CommonJS. So in this particular example, I'm gonna be using Node.js, which is JavaScript server side. So I'm gonna choose CommonJS. Now, if you use a framework like on the client side, front-end development, React is very popular. You can pick that. Otherwise, I'm gonna choose none of these because I'm not using them. So if you had chosen them, they would add specific rules for that framework. Does your project use TypeScript? We're not using TypeScript today, so I'm going to say no. Now, where does your code run? Now, this selection is multiple choice. The first time I did this, I thought it was just single choice. It was actually multiple. So if you want to choose multiple, you have to press the space bar. So does your code run in the browser? If so, you can mark it pressing space bar here, and the icon turns green for the check mark. I'm not going to have my code on the browser. It's just Node server side. So I'm going to uncheck browser, press down arrow, and then press the space key to select Node. Now I can press enter to go on. Now, what format do you want your config file to be in? So this would be the file that we generated so that we can tweak the rules. I find it very easy that the format be JavaScript. JSON is a little bit stricter, so I don't like it. So I cannot have fancy stuff, JavaScript code logic there. And YAML is like JSON, but it's without the quotes usually. So I'm going to choose JavaScript.js. Okay, now successfully created .eslint.rc.js. Now let's go back to Visual Studio Code to see what it looks like. Okay, created a file here, and you can see it's basically an object with property and values and in a standard. So this one is using, if you look at extends means to like use based off a certain standard that was already written by somebody else. So they wrote these rules called ESLint recommended. And the code is somewhere here, node modules. If you go node modules at ESLint, you're going to find it somewhere there if you're curious. But all the rules are defined there, manually hard-coded, so that we don't have to do it here initially. Okay, then other settings here saying, are you using CommonJS? Is it a node environment versus browser and all that kind of stuff. You can find more about these options in the documentation for ESLint, the website. Now, you might have noticed that my code is now highlighting stuff here. I didn't want this enabled at first. That's because I have an extension, ESLint here, but I'm going to disable it for now because I don't want you to see it just yet. Okay, let's go back to Explorer. Now, this is the code, and I intentionally wrote the code all kind of in a weird style. Without indentation here, with a lot of indentation, a lot of spacing between the function name, parentheses, no space before the operator equals, using var instead of let or const, and all that stuff. Using semicolon versus not using semicolon, because I'm trying to trigger some of these rules. Okay, but how do we know if we're doing something bad there? Now let me open a terminal within Visual Studio Code. You can still keep yours or use it here. So I like doing, you could choose here what kind of terminal. I like doing command prompt. I'm in Windows, so simply what we have to do here is npx space ESLint, and it will check the file, but you have to specify in this case. It seems like it doesn't check by default to detect if there are files. So you got to say, okay, what do you want to lint? I'm going to say index.js. What files? Right? Okay, so it linted that. If you can see, there's one error per line. So it's saying here line 1 colon column 5. Okay, so if you go to line 1 and then you go to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's where the problem is. The counter is assigned a value but never used. So the rule name is usually on the right hand side. It's the no dash unused vars rule. So you can click here, I think. Usually, oh, it seems like this one doesn't work. But you can always copy this rule name and go to the browser to find out what it really means if you're not sure. So you can just go to your favorite search engine and paste that name, and it'll automatically point to the docs here, and you can click the first result. So this is the description of the rules. If you're unsure what it means, details, disallow unused variables, and it has several examples. And you can actually tweak this rule to your own liking. If you scroll down, there are options, and you can see this is the key. If you want to override the already default, you can go to the rules section of your ESLint RC file, and you can specify the rule name as the property. And then for this specific rule, the way you change the properties is by passing an array for the value. The first one being whether you want an error, or it can also be warn, or you can also deactivate this rule altogether. Okay, so going back to Visual Studio Code. So I already know about this rule. This just means, okay, you created a variable, but you're not using it. So what's the point? So that's the point of that rule. Some people like their code base to not have unused variables. So what's a way of fixing it? Well, you got to use this somehow, somewhere. Maybe I'm going to use in the return for the hello. I can say plus counter here. I'm going to save the file, and then I'm going to go to the terminal here. I'm going to run npx space ESLint space index.js again. And there you go. There's no more error there. You notice I use npx. I don't know if you're familiar with that. That's because if I go to the node modules directory, there's a .bin, and there's a command ESLint here. If I were to type it manually, I have to type node modules /node modules /bin /ESLint, and then the file. And I don't want to type this whole thing. So instead of doing that, I just do it npx ESLint, which just means, okay, look for ESLint in this particular directory. All right. Okay, yeah, so you can continue fixing your linter issues or errors as you see fit. The next one is, okay, error is defined but never used on line 3, column 10. Line 3, you can see the column 10 here. Usually your text editor or IDE will show you here in my bottom kind of right. It tells me what the line is and what the column is. So hello is defined but never used. So we got a function here that's never used. So what people usually do is they set up this ESLint command to run in their build pipeline, like continuous integration and development, like GitHub Actions. And if it fails, the user is not allowed to deploy or merge those changes. So you can make like a actions file if you use GitHub, a workflow that will run this command every time you try to merge something to master or try to deploy or anything. Now, let's say for some reason you think this rule is kind of strict, I don't like this. One thing you could do is just make it a warning instead of an error. So an error means everything's failed, you cannot proceed, usually, when you have continuous integration in development. But if you just want to warn, hey, you might be doing something wrong, but I'll let you pass, that's the warn. So let's change that. So we're going to go here, ESLint rc.js. So we scroll down to where you see the rules property here in the top level of the object. And we're going to add First, it's usually the name of the rule. This rule is no dash and use vars. You can just copy that. So you can paste it here. Because there's dashes, I gotta add quotes around it. Colon, and then you can define, okay, what do you want to do? Remember the docs had what you have to pass here. So I remember it had something like error string in an array. So if I change this to warn, let's see what happens. Now let's run ESLint once again. Now you can see it's now a warning. It turned into yellow if you can see the color. Before the color for error is red, now it's yellow for warning. So this means, okay, something's fishy here. We don't like this, but we're gonna let you do it. You can deploy. Now, if you don't like the rule altogether, you can always disable. Let me see the docs here. Yeah, the doc says WOF instead of warn. So if you don't like it, I don't like this rule at all, just turn it off, say off there. Now, if I run ESLint again, it doesn't even complain about it. So this approach here is pretty much very common across all the rules. If you need to change any rule, you just go here under rules, add the property for the rule name, and then some array. And then the first is usually whether you want it error, warn, or off. Yeah, let's put it back because I think that might be a good rule. So I'll make it error again. And then error is defined but never used. So go to index. Maybe we gotta use it somehow in this file. Maybe I could call it here and save it. Now there's no more problem. Now let's say we're very nitpickers. Okay, we don't like this coding style. It's not good. I want to add a rule. For example, I don't, some people like semicolons. Some people don't like it. Like I personally like it. So what should we do about it? How can we add? There's a rule for semicolon. You can look it up in the docs. Let's try here in the ESLint RC under rules. I'm going to add a property semi. I don't need quotes because there's no dash. This rule, let's see. Let's look at the docs to see what we should write here. Let's maybe the search. Make sure your version is the same as you're using in your package. Semicolon. Maybe this one. This rule enforces consistent use of semicolons. Okay. Always require semicolons at the end. Okay, if you are the person that requires semicolons, you want to use always. Let's see the examples. Look, if you look here, semi, and if you write it like this, you see this is the value we should write in our rules. Error as the first value, and the second is always. And they give an example that this incorrect code here doesn't use semicolons. For example, line 10. And this is example of correct rule. If you have the always option, meaning line 10 must have a semicolon here at the end of the line of the statement. Let's try it out. I'm going to go to Visual Studio Code. So we're going to write here error, comma, always. Save that. Now I'm going to go around ESLint again. Now we're going to see, oh, some errors now because the rule is now in place. And we must have semicolon. Okay, go to index.js. Let's see. The first one is line 116. Okay, I don't have a semicolon here, so I must add. Run it again. Okay, that one is gone. Now the second, line 4. Okay, I need a semicolon here. And then finally, line 8, I need a semicolon here. There you go. If you run again, it's gone. Cool, but some people don't like semicolon. So what should they do? Well, just go to the rule, change it to another option. I think if we go to the docs again, let's find out how to reverse this to always force people to not have semicolon. We have omit last, never. There you go. This one. This is the example, incorrect if you have a semicolon, and then the correct no semicolon. Let's try that then. If you say never here, and run ESLint. Now everything that we did is now deemed to be an error. And now we would have to go, okay, now they don't want semicolons. I gotta delete every single line that has semicolon. That is 1, 4, 5, and 8. Save it. Run it again to get rid of the errors. You're gonna have some teams that enforce having it. You're gonna have some teams that enforce not having it. So, it's kind of annoying, but that's the way it is. Just follow it. The linter will complain it to. Just change it. You might find yourself out of habit having it or not having it, and you're always gonna have the linter complaining. And then you fix the problem and make the linter pass so you can go on with your life. Yes, you talked about the extension. Now, the extension, there are two things you can do. There's the extension that can warn you, hey, this part is kind of you're not following the rules here and there and there. There are another kind of extension that will auto format everything for you on save. Yeah, so you're using the one that auto formats the bad code into good code. Yeah. I usually recommend beginners to not do that at first because you must learn how to write it by yourself and get into the habit. But as you become, more comfortable, I think you can use it and rely on that. Some people might get, angry because, this is complaining because I did this and that. So just make peace, auto format, save, and go on. Anyway, let's talk about the extension now that you mentioned it. Go here and you can search for extensions. I'm using Visual Studio Code, but whatever IDE you're using probably will have a similar thing, extension, plugin, whatever it is. You can look for ESLint, and Visual Studio Code has the one provided by Microsoft, and this is the one I recommend. You can click to install. I already have it, but I disabled it, so I'm going to enable it. And I'm going to close it. I think I have to reload, so if I Control Shift B reload window, I have to make the errors, right? So if I type a semicolon there, you see it's gonna start complaining. Hey, extra semicolon, and it tells you what the rule name is. And what's nice, you can click this, and it will open an external website that goes to the docs. So that's very convenient. Yeah, you can see under problems, if you open, usually Control backtick to open this kind of thing. There's a problems tab that you can see if you want to evaluate if you have any ESLint problems here. Then click here and it goes to exactly to where it is. So we can fix it. Okay, I go click here, remove it. Click there, remove it. So that's very convenient. Let me see what he wrote. Yeah, beginner do have bad indentation, no semicolons, etc. Yeah, that's why I don't recommend doing all this of auto format and save when you're starting out. But as you get used to it, you can start using it. Yeah, so ESLint is pretty much that. There's no secret to it. Usually teams will meet together to determine what rules they're more interested in. Maybe if you come as a new teammate, you might not like certain rules and probably won't be able to change them, but just follow them and make peace. It's not worth fighting over that. Yes, there are more advanced linter rules that not only touch upon the style, but they look for certain things you can customize to your use case. Yeah, deprecations is very common. For example, a company has their own certain library. For example, their design system, and they're always constantly releasing new versions, but they're breaking changes. So what they do is they write a linter that will tag all those breaking changes. And as the developers who are relying on that design system are using it, they will see, oh, this is now deprecated. They will see a message there every time they run their build runs ESLint, or within their IDE if they have the extension to let them know of any problems. So it's very convenient for identify deprecation so you can change your code promptly. I think going from here, you can customize your own rules. I didn't touch upon this indentation. That's probably bad. There's probably an indentation rule, and if I would guess, it would be called indent. Let's go here. I think it's indent. Indent. ESLint, if you look for that. Yeah, it's the indent rule. So you can say indent, l'array, and probably you gotta say error and then maybe 2 to specify how many spaces you want. Yeah, there you go. It even cares about my ESLint RC file and it's tagging it. If I go back to index, now it says, oh, okay, this is a problem. I want 2 spaces of indentation, but found 24. You can fix it manually. Now, my IDE, Visual Studio Code, does have a quick fix here. I can click, and it fixes the problem for me. So that's convenient if you're like, I'm tired. But again, I don't recommend for beginners doing that. This should do by hand. Anyway, this one, you can go here. Quick fix would be adding 2 spaces to the left, or you can click here, Control dots, it seems. Enter. There you go. It's fixed. Save it. This is my ESLint file. I don't want to lint that, but it's here. There's probably an option to ignore it. There's probably a rule to add a space before the equals. I don't know specifically what rule. That would be nice to find out. And another one is to not have either have 1 space here or no space at all between the function name and parentheses. And there's also rules that prevent you from doing concatenation like this and prefer you to do like a backtick interpolation and so on. Yeah, it's very nitpicky. So yeah, like you said, there's probably a ignore option or file that you can choose. But typically when you run ESLint, you run on specific files that you have to say ESLint space, either the folder pattern or files. Yeah, so that's it.